Okay, I want to talk about toe out here on paper for a minute. Toe out is defined as the difference between a measurement at the rear of the tires and the front of the tires. So in this example, A minus B is your toe out, and we use inches. So in my case, my Ram truck is designated to have from the factory, they designate 0.050, which is just short of a 1/16 of an inch, up to 0.150, which is just short of 3/16. So I guess you can arguably say that they'd like to see about 1/8 of an inch of toe in from the factory for a perfect toe setting. Now, if you talk to people that know these trucks, that have done miles on them, that have done setups, they want them straight. The reason they want them straight is because it's a straight, solid axle, and on the Gen 4s, they have a straight steering link between the two wheels. There's nothing in there that should have slop in it other than your tie rods and ball joints, which should not have any slop. My truck's got 340,000 miles, and there is probably zero slop. I cannot see ball joints move. When I put a bar in, I cannot see tie rods move. The only thing I've got wear in is my steering box, and that has no factor on your toe. So if you follow their advice, you want zero toe. So we do know that some places they give this as an angular measurement on the wheels, which is all good and cute, but the spec from the factory is in inches. So to do it in inches, you have to recognize that it has a tire it came with, in my case a 235/80/17, and I put on grabber ATXs. I measure them at 32 inches in diameter. So you have to do that on a 32-inch tire, an 1/8 inch of toe out. If you put big tires on, like 40-inch tires, that means you got to have a conversion factor of approximately 1 1/4. So your 1/8 inch just became 0.156. Again, it should be at 0 on these four-wheel drive trucks. Not talking independent suspension. That's another story because it's got rubber bushings on both control arms, top linkage, all kinds of stuff. Just crazy stuff. So in that case, they want it preloaded so when things move, the tire contact patch can torque the wheels around, causing rubber compression and causing crazy things to happen. They want them towed in to avoid all this. An 1/8 inch of toe in isn't that much. So moving on, let me talk about how I measured with a tape measure. So on my 32-inch tire, I put on one side I had a nice 4-inch block of steel. That was my dead man to hook the tape on. I lined it up with a reference point on the tire. Now with these grabber tires, people tell you to put a line on the tire. We're talking about an 1/8 inch of toe in to 0. We want a very fine measurement. So can you put that sharp of a line on the tire? I'm going to trust General Tires to have a true running tire. If your tread is not running true on your tire, you probably got some problem with the tire. You can jack it up and run it around and look for a reference. Hopefully, if you check the tread, it'll be true, because if it's not true, it can cause an imbalance in the tire. It can indicate a broken cord if it's an older set of tires. But on a slick, on a race car, yeah, there's no reference point, so you're going to draw a line, and that's how people learn that. But no, on a tire, there should be the tread should be true. And again, I say you can jack it up and check it. So what I did is I checked a reference point on the tire. I used a block of wood. I measured the back. I measured the front, and I got my difference. But the thing is, my point of reference was 24 1/8 inch apart. The tire is 32 inch. So to compare that to the factory spec, I need to do a calculation, 32 over 24, which gives me that. So my 1/8 inch that I measured is actually 1.658, which actually is out of spec on the factory setting. It's towed out too far, or towed in too far. And again, I want 0. So that 1658 is way off from the 0 that I want. Now, I got to tell you, when I started this whole thing, I did it off camera. Using this factor, I actually measured 3/8 of an inch. I bought the truck a year ago, 340,000 miles. I drove it for 10,000 miles like this. Never checked the toe. It was kind of bad to drive. I blamed it on the steering box, but I measured it 3/8 inch out with my factor to get to a factory comparison number. It was actually a 1/2 inch of towed in. The truck was darty. It was hard to handle. I'd drive down the highway and my hands would be sore. I took it on a trip like this with a 165 tow in, and it's a lot easier to drive. I'm going to make an adjustment, get to 0. I do want to digress and talk about Ackerman and going around corners. And this is just way too deep for the topic of toe in, but for tire wear, so let me finish with this Ackerman. So what Ackerman theory says, it actually comes from back when they had horse and buggy, horse carts. Basically, they had solid wheels. So the idea was, if you have a solid rear axle, you draw a line through it. You want your front geometry to turn the left wheel sharper than the right wheel. So if you draw a line through this, perpendicular through this left front wheel to a point here, then you draw a line perpendicular through the right front wheel, you'll get an instant center for all three. That way all three will be on the same center, and there will be minimal friction due to turning. That's all well and good. However, we're not just driving slow speeds around the parking lot. So the other day I was driving on an entrance ramp from one highway to another. It was a pretty sharp curve. I was doing 70 miles an hour. That loads up your right front. Big solid sway bar. So it loads your right front very heavily. Then what you do is, now what comes into play is what is called slip angle. So you'll have an extra loading on the tire in this direction, and then you'll have the inertial force in this direction, which is, we call it imaginary, but it actually moves the wheel. And what that does is your slip angle, you have your direction the wheel is pointed and the tire is pointed, and you have the actual direction of travel of that wheel. And it's going to vary depending on the load on both wheels. So essentially, when you're going around a corner with good Ackerman, you're going to get quite a bit of toe out caused by slip angle. The slip angle increases with speed until you get zero grip and it slides. This angle can be significant. It could be up to 6 or 10 degrees depending on the tire. It varies on very stiff sidewalled racing tires, very soft sidewalled racing tires, street tires, and it also is not just the sidewall, but it's the tread pattern, the tread thickness, the tread material. A lot of factors go into slip angle. Even the material you're driving on, whether it be a clay racetrack, an asphalt highway, or a concrete highway. So it all varies. So that gets very, very technical. You also have in your tire, you have a rolling radius, you have the tire contact patch. The science says that in your contact patch, there's a point where there is no slip, but actually throughout the contact patch, it actually has to slip because you have the circumference of your tire that has to rotate, but you have your rolling radius, which is smaller. So that means it's got to slip to get that full circumference in there. So there's just a lot of details. And one more thing I do want to talk about is your loading. Going back here. So on loading, I have a drawing here where this one appears to be pointed forward for the left front, and this right front, I actually have it penciled in to be towed in. Well, your truck is not going to be balanced. Your truck is going to be off balance. If you put a scale under the tires, and it depends on how the truck's loaded inside. If I'm driving my truck by myself, that's an extra 230 pounds on the left side. So that means I got 230 pounds more here, nothing here. If I have people with me, I have more weight here. Depends on where the back passenger is sitting. But even when the truck is built, it's not necessarily balanced. So a factor that where that really comes into play is, let's say, on a motorhome. A big diesel pusher motorhome, they build it. They've got slide out here. They got a big wide slide out over here. They've got a kitchen sink. They've got a refrigerator. They've got your trays underneath, however you load them under the body. Usually your bathroom's on one side, your bed's on the other side with a slide out. It's all imbalanced. What they recommend for tires is when the diesel pusher is all loaded, ready to go, and this is to get your maximum wear out of your tires, maximum performance, you will then weigh each corner of the truck, each corner of that diesel pusher RV. So you would get a weight for this left front tire. Then you would look at that tire manufacturer, let's say Michelin. You would look at their chart for that particular tire that gives you the load and air pressure for that tire. So you look up that tire, you look at the weight you put on that tire, and that chart will tell you what the correct air pressure to run. Then you can go to the other side. You can get the weight on that. You can look in the chart for that tire and determine the air pressure for that tire. So each tire on your diesel pusher RV will have a different air pressure. And technically, if they had those for your tires for your 3500 truck, if General for their grabber tires had those charts, we probably would run different tire pressures on our truck. They'd vary a lot less because on a diesel pusher you can vary by 500 pounds across the front axle. That's not unreasonable. So, and where that comes into play is you're going to have a tire that's more loaded. That is going to be your primary driving tire. You're going to have a tire with less load. That tire is going to drag. You've probably seen race cars where they break a tie rod, but they keep on going. So that right front, they can steer off that right front. The broken tie rod is on the left. If they break the right front, they usually can't keep going. But let's say they break it left. So this left tire is hanging out here, just scuffing along. And they can steer, whether it be in NASCAR where they're just making it back to the pits, or I've seen guys on a dirt track complete a race, even successfully, with a broken tie rod, because there's very little weight on that left front going around the left-hand corners. All the steer is on that right front tire. It was popular in racing a few years ago to pull that left front tire right off the ground when you're going around the corner. They've got them where they actually do work and help keep the car so they can corner faster now, but that was popular a few years ago. So, point is, with the toe out, if you have a lot of toe in, this tire will be steering it, probably if you're by yourself. This tire will be dragging. You go down the road and you turn to the left or you hit a bump where this becomes your primary tire. Now it's already turned in. If you've got extreme toe in, it'll be darty. You hit the bump, all of a sudden it shoots to the left. Then you have to catch up with it. I don't know how much toe in creates that. I will say my truck was really darty when it had a 1/2 inch of toe in. It was darty. I had to be very careful when I hit bumps and turned, or it would shoot to the left. So a 1/2 inch, a toe in will do that. Again, they recommend 1/8 of an inch, and the people that drive these trucks and do performance with them recommend 0 because they're a solid front axle and you should not be losing your 0 toe. You should not be losing. Now, let me digress even farther. I was reading an article where people said they would use toe in to make the vehicle more responsive, they called it. And they said when it had toe out, it seemed to be a little slushier. Well, if you think it through, what I just said about it being darty, so you're loaded on this wheel. Now you want to turn it to the left. Well, if you're towed in already, when the weight shifts from the primary wheel to the dragging wheel, if this is towed in just a little bit already, it seems to take off and turn a lot quicker when you're at speed on the exit ramp, entrance ramp. If it were towed out, let's say it's towed out this way, and you go from this wheel to this wheel turning left, now you put the weight on this one, oh, it just kind of darted to the right, and you got to catch up with that. Now, another thing too is your slip angle. When you load this and you're turning, now the slip angle comes into play. So there's a lot of science that comes into play. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that talk about it, but the people that have done the research with the tires, those are the people that know, because there is so much that goes into it. I mean, people talk about loading, they talk about tire width, they talk about air pressure, they talk about sidewall construction, they talk about hysteresis in the rubber. Race tires are high hysteresis, meaning they return to where they originally started in the rubber. So if you put your fingernail into the tire, a street tire is a low hysteresis. It means you put your fingernail into it and it comes right back. On a race tire, it's kind of slow. So you put your fingernail into it, you pull your finger out, you come back 5 minutes later, it's still got a dent. You come back the next day, the dent's gone. It's a little extreme, but so there's a lot into this front end alignment and the operation of your vehicle. Bottom line is, you want the tires straight ahead. Obviously, you want to check everything and make sure everything's in good shape, which I will digress because I think you want to know this stuff. Another consideration, which I had happen to me on an older F350 dually, I had a truck that was pulling to the left. And I'm thinking, oh man, this has got a caster problem. This truck, it keeps pulling to the left, pulling to the left. When you have a vehicle that pulls left, pulls right, a lot of times it's a caster problem. You have an imbalanced caster. We would make our race cars 1/2 degree to 1.5 degrees variation from left to right to make them turn left, make them turn into the corner. So I'm driving this truck and it's pulling to the right, and I'm like, man, what is going on here? Well, come to find out, my right rear caliper was hanging up. So I'm driving down the road with that right rear caliper sticking, wearing out my brake pad, and on longer trips, that caliper would get hot. Most of the time, I'm just driving back and forth to work 6 miles each way. So when that caliper would hang up, it would pull me to the left. I put a new caliper on that side, and the truck went straight down the road. So you really need to make sure everything's in order. I'm going to make a video on caliper service, and I was looking for them, because I don't want to make one that is already there. So I'm looking, and this guy, I'm like, oh, this guy's got a caliper service video. No, he's got a brake service video. And when I talk about brake service, what I mean is replacement of brake pads and rotor for brake service. What I mean by caliper service or a brake annual brake service, biannual brake service, what I mean is I'm going to show you how to take the brakes apart, clean them up, make sure everything functions properly, and put them back together. No money spent, just time. If you do that annually, and I live in the Rust Belt, if you're north of I-80 in the country, where it snows, where they use salt, Every year, you're going to want, no matter the condition of your brakes, every year you're going to want to take your calipers off, take your brake pads off, and clean the brakes up, put them back together. No, sir, it's not a sticking caliper pin issue. We're going to look at that, but it's going to be the biggest problem we have is sticking brake pads. Good brake pads that stick in, and then by the time you notice them wearing, chances are it's probably too late. You probably lost a lot of fuel, a lot of damage, driving issues. So I'm going to leave this here, and this is my front end alignment for a 3500 to prevent that right front tire wear. Thanks for watching.